since I chatted with you at the Timberwolves game and again at the show, I've realized something about industry partnerships a little bit, and they're all over the place. Like, what one person thinks is a strong partnership, another person would sort of scoff at. And the range of that, like the scope of the topic, so broad that I kind of squarely realize it's my job to put some structure around it and to exemplify like what good partnerships are and how they're working and as specifically as possible. And I think the best way to do that is to show rather than tell. Because it's one thing, and this is all just kind of in my brain. I just wanted to give you a brain dump real quick before I ask you questions about Navitor. But there are some really rich golden nuggets of examples of like distributors, manufacturers, and suppliers working together in new ways. It seems to me, I'm just going to share this with you, it's like this, it takes like the 6th or 7th question to get to the good part when I'm talking to people. And I think that's really interesting because most people just start by talking about, in general, why it's important to have good industry relationships and stuff. But I guess that's not what I'm going for. I have so much, and I think that's kind of so easy to understand that what I'm trying to do is to get pretty granular about processes and methods and forms of communication and forms of marketing help and examples and examples and examples. So the story is told more through like the prism of what is actually happening than what could happen if everyone got along well. And I think once I realized that, it really helped a lot. So I just wanted to sort of share where I was with this paper and with this like story. So.
I appreciate that because I was poring over the latest issue and reading your articles and things, and I noticed this too at some of our conversations that I think you're exactly spot on that everyone's definition of a strategic partnership might be a little different.
I guess I'm really interested in how you guys sort of attack this concept. Can you just sort of take the mic for a few minutes and talk about how Navitor approaches this partnership concept?
You bet. Yep, and I think how we approach it is usually really based on the customer because we're going to get a feel. We get a feel immediately about where the need is and the receptiveness of us helping. So from the beginning, and I've got a couple examples, and what I'll say is we'll protect the innocent here because I want to make sure, from a customer standpoint.
Yeah, that's fine.
Really, where we found the most, I think where the channel that we get the most receptivity of us going, to use the shoulder to shoulder and going with our reseller to the end customer and starting from the beginning has been in the commercial office product space because, number one, they're hungry. They want to add a new revenue stream, and they're not as familiar with it. So it's more about they're admittingly saying, I don't know that much about print, so I need you. And it's not like we want to be needed, but there's just, they say right from the beginning, we want to understand more, and we want to look zipped up when we go into the customer. And so from the beginning, we will get, we've established this sort of, representation that we will go along with you on an end buyer sales call and we'll coach you. And with some organizations, we've been able to approach it that way. So with that relationship comes, somebody that's completely comfortable. And it did take us a while to get there. Let me just say, it took us a couple years of exactly what you're logging, Darren, as success stories. And then the word gets out. And we started with a few top print buyers. And and we went in with them to a couple of customers, and they said, wow, that's what worked. And then the word got around. And then what we moved to was, first how we'd approach it was, we'll go in on a sales call with you. Let's talk about the customer. And sometimes there wasn't a pre-assessment, but we said, that's okay. We'll go with you, because the way we ask questions together, then that person also learns how we might ask, how we're going to say, is this a good prospect, or are we a good fit? I'll jump fast forward. Later, we learned that, we kind of coach them to do the pre-assessment. So now we've got partners that go, they've gone in, and now they know when to bring us in. It might not be every call, but we've worked together enough where we've got that. You kind of know each other's sentences. Here's the parameters. So hey, we've got one, and then we go in, and then we help refine it. So, but what we really like to do is we'll have a pre-meeting with our reseller and say, tell us everything you know about how they're procuring print, what they're procuring, and a lot of times they say, well, I don't know. And so we developed a list of questions that we're going to assess together. And some asked by the resellers, some asked by us. And then what happens more often than not is they're the buyer, and it could be typically marketing or procurement. Mostly, they're both in the room, and that's what we try to encourage too. Is let's get both marketing and procurement in the room with us. And then there's this dialogue, and it typically goes pretty quickly once you show technology and print. There's a little discussion on docs and things like that, and they say, no, we're ready to go. And then it's more about, quite frankly, they'll ask specifics. And because we can answer them, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
They might say, so we have, this is typical. So with the technology, they want to have approval system. So then they'll talk about, well, I've got to put it through, this GL code in this department, and can this accommodate it? I mean, it gets very granular. And because we're in the meeting, we can answer that quickly and say, yes, that's no problem. I mean, we defer then, and we've got, our technical people that work with their technical people, but because we just right away say, yes, that can be done, or, we'll get back to you on that. It gives, I think, some comfort to the reseller that's brought us in, that there's a good answer. They typically go out of there feeling, I've watched the resellers say, wow, that was great. Glad you were there, that we've got their back in not just the questions, but the next step. It's nice. They feel like, all right, so when we leave that meeting with the customer, they know that we've got, we've heard it direct from the customer. We've each got our, marching orders, and we can go back and really put that with our production folks.
Gotcha.
So, that's sort of I was thinking about that. To me, and maybe that's not, I guess, to go back to what I said is strategic, but the strategic part of that is that it starts so early in the process. So, and I don't think I said once in this whole little example that we talked about price. Because that meeting happens and we talk about the product and technology or, whatever it is that we're offering. I mean, there's a price component, but none of that really ever comes up when we go on these, collaborative calls.
I have a couple quick questions about what you just said, and thank you for articulating that, because I thought it was great. Does the end user care that you're in the room? Do they distinguish between, the two levels of supply, say, or are you viewed in this with the same color jersey as your reseller?
So depending on sales rep may say, these are our print experts on behalf of our company, and so we put that jersey on. Or they may call out, this is our preferred manufacturer, and so they're the experts on it. So we let them set it up. That's part of that pre-meeting. How do you want us to show up? So we ask what jersey we should wear. In that case, then we're more, because I want everybody in the room to feel comfortable. So once that setup is done, then what will happen is usually the end customer will certainly direct anything technical to our team. It's usually myself and the sales rep in that kind of situation.
Okay.
So it doesn't become who's in the room. I mean,
right.
It becomes, it becomes more, can you give me an answer? Another example might be, we had a great, this might be a little something different to add to your, a different level of strategy, but we went in really early in a rebranding situation for a pretty large financial company. Went in with our reseller, and the marketing person was new. She had graphic design capabilities, and it was her first, sort of project to coordinate with this huge financial company. So she had about 5 divisions to manage, each with new branding. And because she was somewhat familiar with print, or graphic design at least, she was excited to have the manufacturer there because she had, some specific questions, of course, on different stocks and things. And what ensued there was she then went to one of the divisions, understanding their, we talked about like a quantity. And so we said, you know what, it's really more suited, the capability for the size of what we're going to see for volume. It's better that you design it for digital output. So she goes back and saves the company time. Let's design something practical because we're probably only going to order this much, I mean, so being there early in the process with that kind of person, now we just helped, the reseller save the end customer time and money too, by just having that early on discussion.
Gotcha. Okay. What kinds of things, let me back up. Think of your 2 or 3 best relationships with resellers, with companies that work with you a lot. What separates that group? I realize that they're all distinct. Each one is distinct and has different circumstances, but as a collective, what are a couple things that are common among your best customers versus ones that wouldn't even think to ask you to join them on a sales call?
Top customer shares with us where they need to be to make the project successful. So they're not protective of either the long-term strategy nor really their margin where they need to be on it. And so it sort of, I think that gets rid of any kind of positioning from either side. When I say open up the books, we open up the books early on and say, here's what the project opportunity is, here's where I want to arrive at it, and let's talk about it. So right there it just sort of, there's a complete transparency on both sides about, everybody says we're all in business for a reason, so we want to respect that. We want our resellers to be successful because they're our lifeblood. So we want them to be successful, and we want them to look good on behalf of the customer. And we want to support our customers, we have to take care of business in our space. But, so I think that's probably the one thing that you could point to, and I realize that when we say trust, I don't want to be nebulous about what does trust mean. but that's an example of when the trust got to that level where we just say, here's what the overall project is. So I think that's the one distinguishing area, because all things after that, really fall in place. And then that goes a little bit further. There's open discussion about the internal, as much as we'd like to be all focused on the customer all the time, there's a lot of internal things that happen. But when there's tips and things shared about how best to approach and work with certain people and organizations, everybody's unique. And when somebody says, that person might respond best to this, it just makes the whole relationship go better. So it's very much a respectful, open conversation.
That conversation, I realize, is a two-way street probably as well. I imagine your best customers are bringing projects to you or questions to you. Does the return happen? Are you calling up your best clients and giving them tips or advice or pointers or any education, anything like that?
Yeah, we're saying, as especially with the reseller group, we said, we're dedicated to this, so we'll put our resources and heads together for a few different things. First, the two-way street, what we do is we're completely open about our, what we're doing in our company, not just acquisitions and the things that we've shared lately, but we've said things about our production and where we're investing resources. And hey, by the way, here's how we've delivered. And if we haven't met your service expectations, here's what we're putting in place to do it. Those are the kinds of things that we just say, here's a couple quality issues we're addressing. We're monthly giving, our report card to them and saying, here's how we perform, where we're meeting our expectations, where are we not, and then let's get to that. So that's where we want to be very open and honest. And secondly, we do take time to say, all right, what can we, and not just collateral. Recently, we put together, we did some research. We said, how can we help our resellers go into their top customers? So we took the three top, the financial, education, and what's the third one? Sorry. Oh, healthcare, financial, and education. We did it. We've got a group of interns together. We worked with our marketing group, and we said, what are the trends? What, from a print perspective, is on the top of minds of marketers, procurement people, and executives in the industry? And we said, here's sort of and we declined to call it a white paper. We said, let's put some research together and say, here's what I'd want to know if I were going in. Here's what we need to know together if that's on their mind. Here's the 5-year trend. How is digital going to affect print? And then we said, so given that this is sort of the state of the industry, here's some ideas on how to approach it. So that's what we did as more of a preparatory, research piece, knowing that, everybody's busy and it's hard to get it in a one page that says, okay, if I needed to know, top things about the healthcare market, what's happening in its growth, and then how will that affect print, here's sort of my, crib sheet on that.
That's really interesting. That's really cool, Beth. What are the companies that are using those materials? What kind of feedback have you received?
Well, I'm even challenging our team there and say, how best can we use it? Because I don't want it to be overwhelming. I want to be respectful of, there are plenty of clients that really are successful if they have, a listing of our products and they put their logo on it. That's just fine. And they go in, right, and they sell that. Then you've got maybe a more complex sale and you're preparing, and then we send that. So I think the important part of that piece and that level is that it's with the more complex sale, and it can't be, I've got a meeting next Wednesday. Usually that's a piece that you use as you're planning, and the feedback's been terrific. I mean, people have said, "Wow, I've never seen something that's useful." Now, what I have to understand though is just, has that translated into a sale for them? We've just had it out for a couple months. So what we need to track is the effectiveness of something that at that level. But it was more developed really for, I think, what you and I've talked about, is the strategic partnership. I mean, when you're that open about the customers you're targeting as a whole, those kinds of pieces help. They just start that conversation. Then you start with, okay, who in that healthcare market, knowing this, who would you target? Who are your top customers?
Yeah. Is it? This is kind of my last question for now, and I might have some later when I fill in all the blanks. And thanks again, Beth, for taking the time out. You're eloquent as always. Is it always your biggest customers, that are your most strategic? I'm just wondering about size and if it's like a directly proportional relationship to strategy, or are there some like small diamonds in the rough that you love working with that maybe aren't necessarily the biggest ones, and maybe conversely there's some people giving you a ton of business who you hardly ever talk to? Is that true, or am I off track?
Oh, totally true. Totally true. Early in my career, I had a customer that, they said, well, they take a lot of, they need a lot of TLC, and they're not very big. We just don't have that much time for them, and they were small, and they became the largest account when I was in the sales role, and it was because, and it's the same true today, that it is not based on size. It really starts with, and I don't want to use the word relationship because that's as nebulous as all the other ones we talked about. But I think it's about the if we as a manufacturer and that distributor, if we're really in sync, and our business objectives are the same, and we understand each other's strategy, and decide that we're a fit for each other, we could work together, then it doesn't matter the size of the company, so to speak, because there are opportunities everywhere. Someone might deem a small distributor has contact with a really large end customer, or maybe they have numerous medium-sized customers. I mean, we're seeing a ton of growth in the mid-market. So what happens there is the methodology, I think I described this earlier, is we start, we might go on every call with them to start with, but they sort of, pick up some skills in that for our particular product line, and learn how to do this particular initial assessment, and then they just, replicate that throughout their account.